الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So as we continue discussing the book Al-Talakhis Nukhbatul Fikr or Nukhbatul Fikr by Hafiz, or by what is the original book by Ibn Hajar rahimahullah. So this Talakhis is by Umar al-Muqbil. And in the last session that we were discussing Hadith al-Sahih Surah Ibn Hajar, that you have mentioned regarding of those matters that are discussed within Ulum al-Hadith, is being able to identify what is said to be Hadith al-Sahih. So we started to discuss regarding Hadith al-Sahih, but we have discussed regarding what is meant, the meaning of Hadith al-Sahih in the ulama of Hadith, and we had mentioned that it comprises of five conditions, where they mentioned Hadith al-Sahih, ittisal sanad, it has a full connected change, dabt al-rawat, also the narrator said to be trustworthy, credible. Third, dabt al-rawat, and also the rawat are said to be they are known for their precise in their memory and recording of the hadith. Fourth, adam ash-shudud, and the fourth is that the hadith, that it is free from any form of irregularities or things that are odd. And the fifth, as they mentioned, it is adam al-illa, where also the hadith, it doesn't have any hidden defects. So these are what is said to be, or this is what is defined as hadith al-sahih lidhatihi, as mentioned by Ibn Hajar rahimahullah in his book Nukhbatul Fikr. Then as for what we have covered, we covered that matter regarding the definition of hadith al-sahih. Then second, also we covered what is mentioned by the ulama of hadith in the books of Mustalah as shurut al-hadith, shurut al-hadith al-sahih. What are those conditions that has to be in place for hadith to be sahih? So we mentioned those things in general, mujmal, and then we start to discuss them in some more detail, a little more detail. So we mentioned hadith to be authentic, then there are five conditions that must be fulfilled. And those conditions that they are mentioned within hadith sahih. Also, we had mentioned that this definition of hadith sahih was not something that came about first by Ibn Hajar, nor something came about by Ibn Salah, but the ulama of before that they also have discussed regarding hadith having certain criteria for it, criteria so as to be able to distinguish those that are said to be maqbool, acceptable, and those that are mardud, those that are not acceptable. So you find that Imam Shafi and others who have discussed this matter, Al-Dhuhali, Imam Muslim, Imam Bukhari, Ibn Khuzaymah, and others of the ulama, Humaydi and others of the ulama, who have discussed that there's a criteria regarding one being able to distinguish hadith which is acceptable and those that are not. So we're picking up from where we had stopped. We start discussing shurut al-hadith al-sahih. We mentioned there's five conditions. We discussed previously ittisal sanad, that a hadith must have a complete chain, and we discussed that matter. Second, we discussed the matter relating to dabt al-ruwat, or adalat al-ruwat. We discussed the second, meaning adalat al-ruwat, that are narrated that they are known for their adala, and we had covered that the matter regarding adalat al-ruwat. So today we'll now start to discuss the remaining three of those criteria for hadith to sahih. So a hadith is considered to be sahih if these five conditions are fulfilled. So after condition that they mentioned, dabt al-ruwat. So they expect concern like dabt al-ruwat, so all the narrators, that they have a degree of accuracy in the hadith that they narrate. So that they refer to dabt al-ruwat, the word dabt meaning al-hifz. So dabt meaning concerning hifz of the hadith. So they have mentioned regarding concerning with this matter, that before this matter where the ulama have stated regarding this matter regarding dabt al-ruwat being the third condition, where they mentioned it's an ittifaq between the ulama that this is a requirement for the narrators for their hadith to be accepted. So this is an ittifaq between the ulama of Islam and between the ulama of hadith that for a narrator, his narrations to be accepted, the thing that he transmitted to be accepted, that he also have to be a person of dabt, of a person who's accurate in his what he has memorized, and what he has retained from the hadith. So it is not sufficient for the person, as they meant, it's not sufficient for him to have adala, but also combined with adala, credibility, uprightness, that also he has to have preciseness in his memory. So this is also of the criteria of the ulama, as mentioned by Ibn Salah, where he mentioned ajma jamahir a'immat al-hadith wal fiqh, that it is something which is ajma, that is agreed upon by the ulama of hadith wal fiqh, ala annahu yushtarat fi man yuhtaj bi riwayatihi, that they mention a criteria, that is a condition for the one that one is in need, one uses as an authority is narration, and yakuna adlan dabit, that a person, this narrator, that is adl, and we've discussed adala before, dabitan lima yarwihi, he has to be dabit also in relation to the things that he narrates. So that's concerning that particular matter. Should the ulama, they have given this matter a great attention. And also you have Tahir Jazairi, who have mentioned in his book Tawji al-Nadr, that discussed concerning ilm al-mustalah, اتفق العلماء الحديث على أنه لا يأخذ بالحديث إلا إذا كان رواته موصوفين بالعدالة والضبط وأن العدالة وحده غير كافٍ. So he mentioned that the meaning of which is that there's an agreement between the ulama of hadith that a person hadith is not taken except that the narrators are described with being of those who possess adala, credibility, standing, and second, adapt. Then he states وأن العدالة, and that as for adala وحدها, by itself, it is not غير كافٍ, it is not sufficient as a criteria for the narrator. So he has to possess both those criteria. So this is something the ulama have mentioned, have emphasized regarding concerning stating this, to the extent that you find of the ulama, they mention al-Waqi' in a story regarding concern that he was asked about a person, Waqi', Abu Sufyan, that he was asked about a particular individual, as mentioned by Khatib al-Baghdadi. So he was mentioned regarding concern in the sense that then فقال, you consider ووهب بن إسماعيل قال ذلك رجل صالح, that this person is a person who's salih. Then he mentioned وَلِلْحَدِيث رِجَال, as for hadith, that is men with criteria. So hadith have a greater criteria than just a person being one who's said to be salih, a person who's upright, and a person who's a decent person. Then also you find the likes of Imam Malik ibn Anas rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned إِنَّ هَذَا عِلْم دِينَ فَانْظُرُوا أَمَّنْ تَأْخُذُونَ دِينَكُمْ, that Imam Malik rahimahullah have stated in this narration that is mentioned by Khatib al-Baghdadi in his book Al-Kifaya, where he states that Imam Malik rahimahullah have stated that إِنَّ هَذَا عِلْم دِينَ, that is knowledge, it is deen. فَانْظُرُوا أَمَّنْ تَأْخُذُونَ دِينَكُمْ, and you should look careful to the one that you take your religion from. Then he mentioned لَقَدْ أَدْرَكْتُ, that indeed I have met سَبْعِينَ عند هذه أساطين, meaning concerning the Prophet ﷺ masjid. People used to rest in the Prophet ﷺ masjid, and he pointed to the Prophet ﷺ masjid. Then he said يقول قال رسول الله عليه السلام, and these people said, they would say قال رسول, that they have narrated upon the Prophet ﷺ قال فما أخذت عنهم شيء, that I didn't take anything from them. So these are people that were people of the masjid. They were at times they will narrate hadith upon the Prophet ﷺ, but he mentioned فما أخذت عنهم شيء, I didn't take anything from them. فإن أحدهم لو أتمن على بيت المال لكان به أمينا, that if one of these people were given the responsibility of being in charge of the Baytul Mal, the Muslim treasury office, he mentioned that that person considered to be a person who is trustworthy. Then he mentioned لأنهم لم يكونوا من أهل هذه شأن, and that these people, they were not from this particular field of being of people of hadith. So he did not take from them. So even though they are known for their trustworthiness, but they were not known for their preciseness in their transmission of hadith. So by this, the ulama have mentioned this as being a criteria. So what is meant by adapt? And sometimes they refer to as itqan. So they mention adapt, itqan, and also al-hif. So they mention regarding the word that is used, adapt. that as for adopt, lugatan, it means luzumu shay. It means for a person to attach to something. So adopt, as they mentioned concerning that, it means qillat al-ghafla, that a person that doesn't, that a person is very precise and they do not make errors often. So that's concerning what is meant by adopt lugatan. Then as for what is meant by adopt istilahan, according to the ulama of hadith, that you find that definition they are given but very similar, but maybe they mention that adopt, as mentioned by Sharaf ad-Din at-Tibi, who died 743 al-Hijri, that he has a book that is called Al-Khulasa fi Marifati al-Hadith lit-Tibi, that he mentioned the book by stating adopt, that he state adopt an yakuna mutayaqqinan mutayaqqithan hafidhan in hadatha min hifzi, that a person that he should be one who's, that a person who's alert and a person of precise memory when he narrates things from his memory, dabitan likitabihi, and also that is accurate regarding his book, in hadatha minhu, if he narrates from his book. Then I mention arifan bima yaqtallu bihi almana in rawa bihi. Then also he mentioned regarding other man, the person also that is very clean, is very is a person of understanding of anything that will may change the meaning of the hadith. So that's concerning Ibn Hajar rahimullah, that is what he mentioned regarding hadith, being the person of dabt. He mentioned dabt as-sadr. So he mentioned dabt as-sadr huwa an yuhaddith bima sami'ahu min hayth an yatamakkan min isti'dhari ma tasha. So what he meant by dabt, that one form of dabt of sadr, that a person that what he has heard from the hadith, that it is accurate, where also the person is able can transmit that hadith to others whenever he wishes. So the person able can recall back that hadith whenever he wishes. So that's the level. That's what is mentioned adopt as-sadr. Then he mentioned adopt al-kitab huwa siyanatuhu, where the person that he preserved the hadith لديه منذ سمع فيه وصحه إلى أن يؤدي من. So the person able, the second type of dabt that he mentioned, the person who may have recording in the book, that a person that he preserve the information from a time in that book, it was written accurately and precisely as he heard it, as and also that until he's able to, until he pass it on to or transmit it to others. So that's concerning what is meant by adopt. So that is accuracy in the information that the person have received, and also the person able can pass back, transmit that narration, what he have received, as he heard it, without any changes. So that's concerning in brief regarding adopt. So that is brief regarding concerning dabt, with a person that is able to retain this hadith, or if you have memorized the hadith, and and that is able at any point to can transmit that hadith as he heard it without any form of changes, whether nothing added or anything subtracted. And if the person change words, that also he have knowledge and preciseness in the word that are being used. So that's concerning in brief regarding concerning adopt. The next matter that is mentioned, anwa adopt. Anwa adopt. So the different type of dabt that they are. The ulama mentioned regarding concerning adopt that it is classed as the degree of dabt. So anwa adopt by way of the degree of dabt. That they mention one, dabt at-tam wa dabt ghayr tam. So they mentioned that Ibn Hajar rahimullah, when he state regarding hadith sahih lidhatihi, he mentioned that adopt at-tam ma ittasal sanaduhu bidabt birawi tam ad-dabt, that yarwi bi tam ad-dabt, the person I've narrated the hadith with tam ad-dabt, then this is what he meant by this. So tam ad-dabt is a higher degree than ghayr tam, where the person is still acceptable, but not to the highest extent. So the ulama, they kind of somewhat have put concerning the different degrees or level of adopt. Of those of the higher level, they refer to as tam adopt. or dabt tam, that will be of those people that they make mistake, but rarely. They make mistake, but rarely. So those are the ones that of the highest level, that those people are well precise in their memory. They're very accurate with what they recite, with what they have memorized, and able can deliver and transmit as they heard it. But also those people, as no one is, though they are not perfect, that if they make, and the errors that they make are rare, very, very few. So those are concerned the highest degree, and those hadith are said, and those people are of the level of a hadith sahih lidhati. Then a second level, another level, they mentioned that will be a wusta. So we have ulya, a higher level. Then we have wusta, which will be concerning of those who have good memory, but also they have mistakes. They have mistakes or errors in their narration, but not, so they are known for their memory, but not to the level of the first level. But also these people that they have more errors. They have enough errors that are known, but they are still within what is said to be accepted regarding their level of dabt. So they have errors, but also have preciseness. Their error is known, but those people haven't reached a level of where they're dismissed. Then the next level below this would be ad-dunya. Martaba ad-dunya. So martaba ad-dunya would be that those people that they said to be dabt as-sayyid dabt. So that's the third level, be those of dabt to say that their preciseness, their memory is somewhat very weak. Their memory is very weak, where that at times that so these are the ones that these ones that are weak, that if they narrate anything on their own, then one have to be very careful. They're normally not accepted. So anything that is transmitted from them that no one else coincide with them, then it is not accepted. So these are the ones who are said to be of those of the class of daif. So you find that adopt of ruwat, that they're not all equal, they're on different levels. No rawi is said to be perfect where he doesn't make error, but the narrators they're on different degrees. They are on different degrees of their level of preciseness. So Ibn Hajar rahimahullah mentioned concerning that al-khabar ahad binaqlin ad tam ad-dabt. So what he meant by tam ad-dabt regarding hadith sahih, that will be of the ayah degree, of an ayah degree. So you find that al-ulama put concerning that narrators on different levels. Ibn Hajar rahimahullah in his book Taqrib al-Ta'dhib, that he put narrators on different levels. So different levels regarding their level of preciseness. So as an example, to give like a table, so you have a table regarding, he put them on 12 level or 12 degrees. So he mentioned regarding concerning of those narrators, that you'll mention that you have the level of the Sahaba, so those ones of a different level. Then you have a next level of narrators, so you have the highest level will be that of a Sahaba regarding level of dabt and adala. Then he mentioned the next level of narrators, thiqatun hafiz, so that person is known to be thiqa hafiz. So kind of somewhat he double up two words, which is, or sometimes thiqatun thabt hafiz. I mentioned thiqatun hafiz, so that a person on the highest level, where he's like he's double with thiqa and hif. So you have that level. Then you have a next level, which is thabt. A person said to be thabt. A person who's then he mentioned la bas bihi, and the next person said la bas bihi sayyul hif aw taghayyur bi akhiri. So walayn al hadith. So you have different degrees of level of hifz that you have put like a table, and so depending on that indicate that the narrator of different degrees, that narrators of their level of preciseness in memory is of different degrees. The next of those things that are covered regarding a dabt, that ulama also have classified dabt by way of different types, that I mentioned dabt as-sadr wa dabt al-kitab. Dabt as-sadr wa dabt al-kitab. So dabt as-sadr, as it was alluded to by Ibn Hajar rahimah, we mentioned before, that of the ulama who put a-dabt into two categories, qismain. So a-dabt ila qismaini, qism al-awwal dabt as-sadr wa qism al-thani dabt al-kitab. So as mentioned, as we said, that Imam Shafi rahimullah also alluded to this by mention in his book Al-Risala, stating وفي شروط الراوي الذي يحتج بخبره as for that narrator that we use as an authority, accept is khabar, is information. قال حافظ إن حدث من حفظي, that a person is a hafiz, that is able can narrate from his memory. حافظ, that he mentioned, that's one. حافظا لكتابه إن حدث من كتابه. And the second is the person who is a hafiz and he transmit from his book. So he reads from his book. He doesn't rely upon his memory, but rather he rely upon what is in his book. And the other one, the first that he rely more upon his own memory. So those are the two categories of dabt. So Ibn Hajar alayhi rahmatullah قال الضبط ضبط الصدر. So that's the first type. And as we mentioned before, هو أن يثبت ما سمعه, where the person able can retain and confirm what he has heard, بحيث يتمكن من إحضاره متى شاء, that a person able can bring it forward whenever he wishes. The person able can recall it whenever, recall that information whenever he wishes. So whatever you have heard before, whenever he's ready to to transmit it, then he can easily record it as he heard it. Then I mentioned the second type, dabt al-kitab, and the dabt of the book is huwa siyanatuhu, where the person able to preserve that book. لديه منذ, from the time that he سمع فيه, when he heard that information and recorded, وصحه, and also recorded and verified the information, إلى أن تؤدي منه, until the person able to transmit that information. So that's concerned. So those are the two categories of dabt. Dabt as-sadr, where a person memorize in his head, and the second, where a person has recorded that information. So he recorded that information in his book and he has preserved it. So that's the two type of dabt. So so you might find that certain narrators that they may more rely upon. So you find narrators fall into those two categories. They fall into those two categories. So I mentioned regarding concerning a narrator like Ibn Lahiya, Sa'id ibn Lahiya, that Abdullah ibn Lahiya, rahimahullah ta'ala, who died 174 al-Hijri, that I mentioned that Ibn Lahiya, who is one of those narrators that is well known, that mentioned that كان عالما حافظا قاضي مصر, that he was an alim, حافظ قاضي للمصر, and a judge of Misr. فقد سمع منه 72 تابعيا إلا أنه, that many have heard he had heard from many of that, the tabi'in, over 70 plus tabi'in he have heard from, إلا, then I mention except احترقت كتبه, but then eventually his books were burnt. Then I mention فمن سمع منه بعد, so those who heard after him, or who took hadith from him after his books were burnt, then it mentioned that وحديثه غير صحيح, then his hadith is considered not to be authentic. So when his books, he used to rely upon his books. When his books were burnt, then he started to narrate from his memory, and then those hadith were considered to become questionable. They became questionable because he was known to be more precise when he narrated from his books that he had. When they were burnt and he started to rely, the books were not available, and he then started to rely upon his memory, then he started to make errors. So whoever narrate from him, I have a discussion regarding that particular narrator, Ibn Lahiya, a lengthy discussion regarding that particular matter, but overall, that of the things that added to what was discussed about him is matter pertaining to when his books were burnt, because he used to rely upon his books. So when they were burnt, then whatever he narrate from his memory, even that add to criticism against him. But I'm saying alimun fadil qadi al-Misr. And next matter regarding ad-dabt min kitab, that of the ulama who discuss, between the ulama, they discuss regarding, do we accept narrations, transmissions from those who narrate from their books. The one who narrate from his book, should we accept their narrations or not? And so those who, you have that discussion. So those who, so amongst this you have aqwal of the ulama, and they state regarding of the ulama on this matter that those who did not take from those who narrate from their books, of those of the ulama regarding those who narrated from their works, from their books, of those who did not take from a narrator who read from his books and not from his memory. And so of those, they mentioned regarding Imam Malik, of those of that approach regarding only accepting from those who narrate from their memory, not from their works, and others. And they mentioned also Abu Bakr, Sayyidalani, Ash-Shafi'i, also of that way inclined. So those of the ulama, Imam Shafi, Imam Malik, Ibn Anas, rahimahullah, and others who hold that a person should narrate from his memory, and they were cautious or did not accept from those who narrate from their books. Then others who take a different path, which is, although become more relaxed. They will become more relaxed regarding accepting from anyone who narrate from their works. That so you have that other approach of those who were relaxed on that on that matter. Then you find a third, which is mutawassit, those who were somewhat in between, not to those who said completely no and those who say completely yes. They were like in between. They were like the middle path, where they mention فَأَجَازَ الرِّوَايَةَ مِنَ الْكِتَابِ, that they allow to accept narration from a kitab, غَيْرَ أَنَّهُ لَوْ أَعَارَهُ أَوْ خَرَجَ مِنْ يَدَيْهِ, that if the person was to lend his book out, or the book have left his possession, لَمْ يُجِزْ رَوَايَةَ عَنْهُ, they didn't give, they didn't accept the person's narration. So they have a certain sort of the ones who that they would accept if the person's book is still intact and still with him. If the person was to lend his book to others, or his book have left or gone away from him, not in his possession anymore, then they would not accept his narrations. They would not accept the narration that came from that book, because that book was not in his possession all the time. So that's concerning that matter regarding acceptance of narrators who dubbed as al-kitaba, those who narrated from their books. Is it allowed or not? As we mentioned, 3 aqwal. Ibn Salah rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned as-sawab regarding this matter, ma'alayhi al-jumhur. Ibn Salah, he mentioned that in this matter, regarding those 3 approaches or opinions, those who say no, not to take from those who narrate from their books, only from their memories. You take from those who are more easygoing, more relaxed on the matter, where they accept mutlaqan in anyone who narrate from their works. And then you find a third group who only take from with condition. So they were like in-betweens, who will take, but at times will not. They will take, as mentioned, if the person had his book and preserve it and kept it in his possession, but if the book was to leave him and gone to others, then they will not accept. So Ibn Salah rahimahullah قال والصواب ما عليه جمهور. Then he mentioned وهو توسط, and that's like the middle path, the middle ground, بين إفراط وتفريط, between of those who go to both extreme, to the extreme right of saying no completely, or to the next extreme left of saying we accept everything. Then I mentioned فإذا قام راوي في أكت وتأمل بشرط الذي تقدم شرحه. Then I mentioned that as for the person who comply with the condition that we have mentioned before regarding what he takes and what he gives. So I will mention regarding concerns. So that's concerning that matter, which is that acceptable with those conditions. Then on this next discussion regarding adopt, regarding how to verify the level of preciseness of a narrator. So how do we verify how precise a narrator is? So the ulama of hadith, they have a system of how to verify different ways of how to verify how precise a narrator is. So you have concerning of those ways, for example. So as example, مقارنة بين الراوي وبين أقراني. So that one of the method to use to see to know how precise a narrator is, that they'll compare between him and his contemporaries. So those of his contemporaries, then they will compare to see between them to see their level of preciseness. Also have a method regarding concerning that a muqarana between hifz al-rawi, ma kitab, to see the person who has a book and when he narrates from his memory, are they the same information that is being transmitted? So he has books, and also at times he narrates from his memory, then to compare between both. So that to compare to see the both, to see a comparison would be made between his narrations of hifz and that which is recorded with him, to see are they the same or there's difference. So also imtihan dabt al-rawi, another way of verifying how accurate a narrator is in his memory. Imtihan dabt al-rawi. Also other ways of doing so is to test the person's memory. So you have different stories regarding that of imtihan, a form of testing narrator, regarding his memory. So you find these majalis al-ilm, where a person might mention certain hadith and see if the narrator can repeat back certain hadith to see how accurate he may be, And sometimes I might change some of the wordings to see if the person would able to identify that there's a change that have been mentioned in certain hadith, to see did he just parrot back whatever he heard, or he know exactly what he heard and can tell when there's changes been made. So you have those ways of imtihan al-rawi regarding his dabt, and you have different story that is mentioned regarding those matters. Also, and other ways, and other babul mudhakira, also a way regarding concerning that bab mudhakira between the ulama, that to see that how often the person that he try to review his hadith. So the more often is the person who's always reviewing his hadith, then that also is a way to see the person how precise he is, that a person who memorized and then there's no review of his hadith. So those are things that are of the things that are used, of those things, method that are used to check the preciseness of the narrator. So that's concerning matter regarding dabt al-rawi. So those are the things, so some of the matters that relates to dabt al-rawi. The fourth, so now we go to the fourth condition of hadith al-sahih, where the author mentioned salamat or adam shudud wa salama min al-shudud. So the hadith also have to be free from, shudud. The hadith have to be free from being labeled as shudud. So what is meant by this? So in this discussion, they mention regarding concerning salamat, as-salama min al-shudud, that shudud, ash-shadh, mean infirad. Shudud mean infirad. So something which is on its own, single. So something which is shudud, meaning something is on its own, odd. So that is shudud. So something being single, on its own, odd, this is shudud lugatan, according to the language. As for shudud in the ulama al-hadith, then of those who have put it into two areas. So shudud in the ulama al-hadith, that if you want to give a general meaning, that of those who are mentioned concerning shudud or shadh, that they mention, it is hadith alladhi yarwihi rawi thika. So shudud is a hadith that has been narrated by a rawi, a narrator who thika. يخالف فيه من هو أرجى منه, where he opposes someone who's more reliable than he is. Or I mentioned rawi al-maqbul. But more, so you have that is so من أي وجه من وجوه الترجيح, where so generally concerning الشذوذ as a general meaning in the أهل الحديث هو الحديث الذي يرويه راوي ثقة, is hadith that has been narrated by someone who's ثقة, trustworthy, and of precise and good in his memory. يخالف, and that narrator who is ثقة, trustworthy, sharp in his memory, he contradicts someone who's more reliable than he is. And those factors could be different factors. It could be factors where the one who is thiqah, trustworthy, credible, precise memory, but he's contradicting 10 others who are similar to him. So one contradicting 10 others. So they have more numbers on their side, but he's saying something contrary to what they're saying. Or it could be that other person that he's conflicting with, going against, that person arja minhu, that person maybe is more accurate than he is in his memory, and that could vary. So those are things that is referred to as shudhuz. So of the ulama, when discussing concerning a shudhuz, that they put it into two types, into two areas, shudhuz, and they give this definition: and yarwi, as we mentioned, and yarwi arrawi al-thiqa hadithan, that a narrator who is thiqa, who have narrate a hadith, يخالف فيه من هو أوثق منه أو أولى بالقبول. So that's what we have just stated. That is the form of, this is one of the meaning of shudhuz. Rawi, thiqa, yarwi hadithan, a narrator or thiqa that have narrate a hadith, but يخالف, he contradicts, oppose, فيه من هو أوثق منه, one who's more accurate than he is, أو أولى بالقبول, or that narrator is more fitting to be accepted. In this case, it is more befitting to accept that other narrator, because he may be more precise in his memory, or he have more in numbers, or he know that story better, he was a witness. So in this case, that narrator is giving precedent over this one who's contradicting him. So that's concerning hadith thiqa from that angle. Also, second, hadith al-shudud or hadith al-shudud, and yatafarrad. In another case of hadith al-shudud, and yatafarrad, where الراوي برواية, that a narrator that is a single narrator of a particular narration, لا يكون عنده من الثقة والضبط, that he hasn't attained that level of being of preciseness, and also that high degree regarding his dabt, his memory, and his adala, ما يحتمل معه تفرده بتلك رواية, where you start to question that narration of his. So there's somewhat the person start to have some reservation regarding his narrations. So even though some was thicker, but you have some narration where in this case, can you rely upon him being a single odd narrator in this particular case? So that's concerning hadith al-shudud. And as we mentioned, that hadith al-shudud, that will be discussed separately later on. It will be also, it is classed as hadith. So the hukum of hadith al-shudud, that is hadith al-daif. When hadith is said to be shadh, then it is said to be, or a section of the hadith, wordings of the hadith is said to be shadh, then it's considered to be mardud. It's considered to be a weak narration, or that section of hadith, it is weak. So that will be discussed further when we discuss the types of hadith ad-daif, which is hadith shadh. The next, and this is one of the areas regarding the study of hadith that offers more intricate matter regarding ilm hadith, and regard a level of so that's one of more, and it requires for one to be able can detect shudhuz, a hadith being shadh, then a person has to see the hadith, have to gather all the narration of that hadith. So that hadith that you're studying, you have to look at all the other narrations to be able to can detect, so to compare that hadith with the various narrations of that hadith, for you to be able to can detect this matter regarding the hadith being said to be shadh. Then they discuss the fifth of those conditions, salama min al-illa al-qadiha. Salama min iddat min illa qadiha. So as for this matter, the ulama mentioned regarding that concern, that what is meant by this were asbab, ghamid, khafiyya. So it is reasons that are ghamid, that are said to be ghamid, that are ghamid, that one might skip over it's not apparent. It is said it says something which is not apparent. خفية, which is hidden. تقدح في سعة الحديث, that will impact on the validity from the hadith. It will remove, it will impact on the authenticity of the hadith. It have a negative impact on the hadith. Even I mentioned ظاهره, even though from the hadith it's apparent the hadith seems to be upright. The hadith seems to be upright, seems to be okay, but there's a hidden defect that is within the hadith that require for the person to be meticulous to be able to detect this. So this is hadith al-illah, and also this is of the more, I would say, more detailed matter regarding ilm al-hadith, detecting these illah, these defects, hidden defects, obscure defects that are hidden, even though the hadith, from what is apparent, it may seem to be okay. It seems to be okay. So these are the condition of person of so these are the condition that has to be in place for hadith to be considered to be authentic. Aywa.
What would be an example of a hidden defect?
So with hidden defects in the hadith, we said that you have what I said, hidden defects that I said it will be discussed further, but it could be a matter which said you have like a matter regarding shuzud is a part of hidden defect. You understand? So as we'll give some example later, but those hidden defects, it may vary, but you find concerning that mudraj, they refer to as mudraj, which we'll discuss later, where a narrator might inject something in the hadith that you might think is a part of the hadith, but in reality it is his statement. It is his statement. So those are illah of the hadith. Now, as we said, that, shuzud, hadith bin shaz, it is also classed as a form of illah. So hadith shaz, where a narrator who is trustworthy may have made an error in the hadith by maybe adding wordings or saying something contrary to others, then that will be a form of illah. But referred to in certain cases as shaz. Or in some cases, they refer to as, also you have like tadlis, al-khafi. So all these things is a part of hidden defects, but those things will be discussed separately in upcoming chapters. Hopefully that makes some clarity. So that's concerning the general definition regarding concerning hadith as-sahih by way of his definition, by way of the definition of hadith as-sahih. And next matter, so overall, so said that overall regarding for hadith to be deemed for hadith to be classed or hadith to be graded as sahih, that these are the conditions that must be fulfilled. Again, ittisal al-sanad, it have a complete chain. So if there's any breakage in the chain, and that may, then the hadith is considered to be, it has forfeit a condition of authenticity. So of those breakage, it could be in the form of munqata, and to be discussed, mursal, muallaq, mu'dal. These are terminologies used indicating that there's a breakage in the isnad. And those will be discussed separately in the field of when we discuss hadith da'if. So you have wordings that give an indication that a hadith has some that has a breakage, munqata, mursal, mu'dal, muallaq, and the likes. As mentioned that mudallis or mursal al-khafi is a form of breakage in isnad, but these ones are khafi. These are the ones that are hidden. Mudallis at times. Mursal al-khafi. And also those will be covered separately, inshallah ta'ala. The next of the condition, second, adalatul rawat, that all the narrators have to have credibility and standing, as we have mentioned before. So the person is attacked, and it could be the person may lose his adala based upon fisq, that is a person known to be one who's involved in evil practice, that also the person who adala, he lies, that remove the person adala, that also with this also they mention al-bidah, the person falling into bidah, as we'll discuss that these are the things that are mentioned that can impact on the person's adala and the person's character. So those are the things to be covered regarding that matter, regarding hadith daif and what can impact on a person's adala. Also, third, dabt al-rawat, that a person also have to be precise in their narration, whether they're narrating from their memory or they're narrating from their book. And from their memory, it doesn't mean the person does not make any mistake at all. But the person that dabt, that a person that he have a certain there's a criteria that he has to exceed or pass. So there's certain criteria that a person have to, or that a person have to achieve or attain, and we have mentioned that that particular discussion. So you might find hadith of different grading based upon dabt of the rawi. Then I mentioned the next of that they mention that لا يكون سالم أن يكون سالم من شذوذ والإلة. So the next is that those two, that hadith is free from any form of shudud, that things are irregularities, things are odd. And second, salim min illah, and also there's no hidden defects that will have a negative impact on the hadith, which the hadith will be. So those are the things all that has to be in place. Those are the general condition. So before we go to the next matter, regarding are there other conditions that are mentioned regarding hadith sahih? Are there other conditions? But before we go to this, so that's the next matter. We'll go to the next next matter. You find out these are the general conditions that are agreed upon by the ulama of hadith. These 5 conditions are agreed upon by the ulama of hadith. Sometimes you might find a difference, even though the conditions are somewhat clearly known and articulated by the ulama of hadith, that you might find still the ulama of hadith at times may disagree on a particular hadith or some hadith. Are these hadith authentic or not? One says authentic, and another saying it is not authentic. But the conditions are somewhat straightforward. Why is this? The reason of this is because the application of these rules and these guidelines and these criteria, at times one alim looking at the hadith may hold this particular narrator to be that is thiqah. He's a trustworthy narrator. He has good memory. And another might think him not to be. So they might differ on particular case. So this is the reason of this difference. So one might see that hadith that have in it there's an illah or the shudud, where the other may not. So these may vary with one alim with another at times in the application of these conditions. So applying these conditions to hadith, at times you might find some hadith there's a difference between the ulama, because for one these criteria are not met, and for another with him they're met. So at times you find that difference. The next matter, as we said, there's other condition. Are there other conditions that have been stipulated or mentioned regarding hadith sahih? You have other conditions that are mentioned by some, but these ones in most part that of other criteria that is mentioned by some, that some stipulate regarding concerning with these conditions, there are others. So with these conditions, there are other additional conditions. What are some of those additional conditions that are mentioned by some? Some stipulate the condition for hadith to be authentic, sahih, and yakun al-rawi mashhur bitalab, that the narrator is known to be one who is well known to be a talib al-ilm. Is well known to be one who's a talib. So that's a condition some has mentioned regarding an yakuna min talabat al-ilm ma'rufin, that person or the narrator must be known to be a person who's a talib al-ilm and he's known for this. He's known to be a talib al-ilm. That's of a condition some mentioned. Others mention as additional condition that for the narrator يكون عنده الفهم والمذاكرة وكثر السماع, that for the narrator is known to be one who has fahm, that he has to have no understanding of the hadith. Also mudhakira, that a person also have repeat the hadith or have these majalis where the hadith is being read And, and also is known to be one who's constantly involved in the hearing of the sitting in the sitting of the sittings of hadith. So hearing of hadith. So you have those who put that as a criteria, even though those are not per se criteria per se. But that goes back to isnad. That goes back to matter regarding the isnad. That goes back to the first regarding the person is known to be talib, well known. That goes back to the person's adala. That goes back to the person's adala. The next of those criteria that they mentioned, that someone mentioned that that the narrator that يكون راوي عالم باللغة العربية ومدلولات الألفاظ, that also the narrator has to be one who understands Arabic language. One must know Arabic. So he must know Arabic language and the meaning of these. So you have to have some proficiency in the language. So this they mentioned regarding concerning some of the I've mentioned regarding after the criteria of the narrator of the hadith sahih, but this also it falls in adapt. This also falls regarding dabt, regarding a person knowing the language of Arabic or Arabiya, that a person knowing this language and its wording and the meaning, then this also of the criteria for that falls into dabt. The next criteria that is discussed between some of the ulama that I mentioned, أن يكون راوي فقيها, that the narrator should be a one who's a faqih. And of those who kind of somewhat stipulate regarding concern حتى إذا رأى بالمعنى لا يغير الأحكام, that he doesn't narrate the hadith that may change the ahkam that is taken from it. So you have to be one who's a faqih. I know the ahkam that can be taken and derived from the hadith. And of those who kind of somewhat more inclined towards this condition, Imam Abu Hanifa, alayhi rahmatullah, that he can somewhat stipulate that the narrator should be one who's a faqih. But overall, that the ulama of hadith did not stipulate this criteria. But of some of the ulama who stipulate this criteria, but it's not a criteria regarding that is a must. So if it is something that is there, then that's better, that's more useful, but it is not a condition. Then next they discuss regarding which the condition regarding other condition that I mentioned regarding hadith, as Sahih was mentioned regarding al-mu'asara wa talaqi, that the narrator of the ulama who mentioned that as for that the person must have met that sheikh and have heard from him. So you must have to directly meet the sheikh in person and you have heard from him directly in person. Someone mentioned so that they call that is called al-liqa. Well, look, so it's like meeting the person, your sheikh, and hearing from him. And others who mention that what is sufficient is mu'asara, that it is sufficient for you to be in the same time period of that person and a possibility of you meeting him. And they mention regarding imkan al-liqa, and a possibility of meeting him. So both were contemporaries, both were known to be in the same region or area, where a possibility that he did meet him. So I said that is sufficient. It is not per se a condition that you have to prove that he actually sat in front of him and heard from him. So you have those conditions that I mentioned regarding al-ruwat, but those things are plain come into effect regarding hadith al-mudallis, as we'll discuss. Some mention regarding concern that you have other things that are discussed, but those are some of the conditions that I mentioned. So those are additional condition mentioned by some, but as we've explained, most of those conditions that they either fall into what is mentioned before of those other conditions. Another matter regarding this matter is we mentioned those who add those conditions and those who of the five may reduce them. Those who may reduce from those five. So you find that Al-Dhahabi rahimahullah ta'ala, Imam Al-Dhahabi rahimahullah, in his book Muqidha, which is a book in Mustalah al-Hadith, and I mentioned an important book, especially in the early in Mustalah al-Hadith, that they mentioned regarding concerning when he mentioned Hadith al-Sahih, he mentioned regarding concerning Hadith al-Sahih, فقال هو ما دار على عدل متقن متصل سنده. So when he defined Hadith al-Sahih, Al-Dhahabi, he state Madara, so what revolves around or what involves a person who have adala, mutqin, which is dabt, preciseness. واتصل سنده is isnad, is continuous. وإن كان مرسلا ففي احتجاج به خلاف. Then I mention if it is mursal then to use as a proof is a khilaf between the ulama. Then I mention وزاد أهل الحديث, that أهل الحديث that they add to this condition سلامته من الشذوذ والعلة, that hadith also have to be free from shudhuz والعلة, as we have discussed those two terminology before. So he mentioned فمجمع على صحته, then what is agreed upon regarding what is said to be hadith sahih, muttasil, that it is continuous chained, salim min al-shudhud, it is free from any form of oddness or irregularities, wal illa, any hidden defects, wa an yakuna rawatuhu, and its narrators ذوي ضبط, that they are known for their memory, وعدالة, and also they are known for their adala, وعدم التدليس, and they are not known for tadlis. So that was his summary of hadith sahih. But what is alluding at then he said, then after that he mentioned وزاد أهل الحديث سلامته من الشذوذ وعلة فيه نظر على مقتضى نظر الفقهاء. Then he mentioned that the ulama of the fuqaha, some of them that they kind of somewhat with hadith sahih, that they may take the understanding and the approach that the hadith sahih that they mention it is it's narrated by a person who is trustworthy, good memory, wa itisal sanad. As he mentioned, وفيه نظر على مقتضى نظر الفقهاء فإن كثيرا من العلة يأبونها, as many of the fuqaha that they reject many of the illah that are found in hadith. So I show that some of the ulama sometimes that they may take a more lenient stand regarding a more lenient approach or lenient stand regarding that they stipulate that hadith also have to be free from al-illah. And those, as I mentioned, some of the fuqaha. So that's concerning, as we mentioned for today, that these are said to be hadith as-sahih by way of his condition. So we mentioned 5 conditions and explain each of them with some more detail. And with inshallah ta'ala will bring things to an end, this session to an end, and the next next session we'll still discuss other matters pertaining to a hadith or sahih. So he also has some other matters pertaining to hadith or sahih. So today we discuss concerning hadith or sahih by the 3 of the remaining condition, which is dabt or riwat, and we discuss salam min shudhud wal illah, and also other conditions that are mentioned by some. And we're going to somewhat explain what the stance regarding those, and also that some of the ulama also sometimes might have reduced the conditions of hadith sahih. So that's concerning in summary regarding this discussion, and inshallah ta'ala we'll continue in the next session, continue regarding hadith as-sahih. وبالله تعالى توفيق وهذه السبيل والآخرة والحمد لله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.